there's a real difficulty, it seems, when you're dealing with falling budget revenues on a monthly basis. Those revenue estimates have been falling. We don't know, and nobody's got a real good guess where it's going to end up in April. And so you're having to balance those falling revenues and an anticipated but unknown stimulus package. It sounds like today the advice you got was set your sights low, create a list of priorities, and then at the end go through that list and add things on if you can. Is that?
I think that was part of the message. You know, part of it, this whole discussion was just about procedures and what decisions can be made at this point in time that really don't have a big effect on the final balancing of the budget. Right. So we wanted to get we wanted to get a handle on that, which we got a little ways down that road, and then the rest of it is just looking at the big picture and when do you start making decisions about what you're going to fund through the next 2 years, and when are you going to have to start pairing off some of the ideas that have been added to the budget.
And what did you come away with from that meeting in terms of what a possible solution or plan of attack might be for these next 25 days or 20 days or so before the?
Well, I think the plan of attack that Senator Bales and Representative Sykes worked out is probably the one that makes the most sense at this time, and that is have the subcommittee continue with hearings as they normally would on issues that they need to hear about, but to start making some of those smaller decisions that don't have big effects and get those into the pipeline so they can be programmed into the systems that we have that make the final bill, and then try to divide the remaining issues into two parts. One, those that are just related to state general fund and depend on how much revenue we have coming, and those that relate to state operations and their interaction with the stimulus package, which will probably be a while before we know any of that information.
Clayton Shank pointed out that even if they sign this stimulus package bill, if the president signs it by President's Day, we may not know what we're getting here until after the legislature is scheduled to adjourn. Representative Mendenhall suggested that maybe we ought to think about saving some days so that we can come back later and address the stimulus. Is that something that you're thinking about?
I think it's something we have to keep as an alternative plan. We're all hoping that we'll have enough information that we can use the tools that we got in the current appropriations process to deal with that money. No one in the legislature wants to leave town and just leave it to the executive branch to distribute that money through the budget amendment process. That process was never designed to work with large amounts of money. It was just there for if for some reason a federal program changed and we got a few $1 million out of that they could make use of it without going to the expense and trouble of bringing the legislature back to
But when we're talking about what could be $800 million, the legislature doesn't want to cede control over that.
And the process, and it wouldn't be a good process just to have that go into an administrative distribution system, because I think people would feel they didn't have any input into it. They'd feel cut out of the opportunities that the stimulus provides. There would be all kinds of rightly or wrongly assumptions that there wasn't any transparency in the process and that favoritism could be going on out there. And so I think just for the good of the whole process, that the legislature should at least have some oversight into the distribution, and then we should have a process, a formal process that you have some legislative oversight after the money's been appropriated to see that it's used properly.
Now, throughout the session, there's been a lot of talk about Republicans and Democrats getting along and working together to get through this budgeting process. So far, just milling around the Capitol, you hear a lot of that. Until this last weekend, when we heard, when we read the article about the governor's comments about the legislatures milling around the gate like cattle, and he needs to whistle them through. Does that create a problem with the legislature when there are comments like that? Or is this just the governor being the governor, or is there a rift growing there now?
Well, I think anytime the governor makes those kind of comments that demean the legislature and make it appear the legislature is not relevant in the process, I think that does create a rift between not only the Republicans in the legislature, but also the Democrats, because they take their job seriously. They believe they're up here to do good work, and certainly are trying. So, anytime those comments are made, it's not helpful to the process.
And it sounds to me like what you were saying today, and with this meeting, was that you're trying to figure out what the best process is for dealing with these falling revenue estimates and an unknown stimulus package, and that this wasn't some strategic delay tactic that these subcommittees haven't been making these votes.
First of all, it's very early in the process, and I would guess that in most years you wouldn't see subcommittees start making votes any earlier than they are right now. Secondly, we are in a new situation. The governor has dealt with two legislators who have seen nothing but increased revenue collections on an accelerating pace. And so it was the governor's job is to present a balanced budget, which he's done, and the legislature's job to get out of here with the balanced budget. And the governor's managed to do that both times because they've had accelerating revenues, and they've managed to balance the budget by spending up all of the money that came in. Some of us in the legislature have been here through a couple of these downturns when we've had to actually look at the budget and prioritize and limit growth. We've never really been into a situation where we've had to cut budgets, but we've been through this before, and we know from experience that, if you proceed at it at a methodical pace, keep a steady hand on things, that, we'll work through this in the time that we have.
And there was a couple of mentions in the memo, and I'd like to get a copy of that, Senator Bales and Senator Sesso's joint memo regarding this subcommittee process. Is that a sign that Republicans and Democrats are still doing a good job of working together on this?
Well, we will, because we know, especially with the tied House, that if we don't have cooperation, that we have the chance for a real problem. And I know that the House Democrat leadership is sincere about working through this, and I certainly am. We're not trying to make political hay out of this. We just know that we have to approach this in a reasonable and fashion, so that when we get done, we have a good product. There's no point in rushing it, and if we didn't learn anything from last week, is that revenues are down. So if you start rushing a budget through on revenues that you already know aren't there, you're going to have problems, and the sooner, I guess, the administration comes to the realization that revenues are not going to be adequate to support their current budget and starts helping us with the process of prioritizing it, then they'll have, between them and the legislature, hopefully we'll come out with a budget that works for most of them.
And so far, is that not happening? They're not quite acknowledging that revenues are going to be lower than what they had hoped?
Well, that's my understanding. Their comments in the paper last week implied that. Our staff has said that they're not getting any great feedback from the budget office yet, although it's just been over the weekend that there needs to be any adjustments. I think that issue will be fleshed out more on Wednesday when the House Taxation Committee looks at the revenue estimate, and we'll see what the participation in that process from the second floor is.